Today, Mitch and Vilos, and he says that some people call him Vilos. So he's going to be working with us. He's a graduate of the J. Reuben Clark Law School at BYU, so we had a pretty good education there. His law practice focuses primarily on two areas: handling criminal cases involving self-defense and weapons charges, and representing accident victims in personal injury cases. His success as a personal injury lawyer has allowed him to delve into a unique area of the law in which he has interest and passion in weapons law. He represents gun owners and gun dealers and has worked on cases in several different states. Now, the reason he's here today is because some of us obviously have questions, a myriad of questions, on employees and guns. We've seen several court cases, as far as the Supreme Court in the state of Utah on what you can do with employees and guns, permit holders or not. Last year we had a bill go through our legislature on the carry permits, whether you needed a carry permit or you can carry freely without any permit and have your gun exposed. And it was called, quote, the constitutional carry legislation, even though you already have a constitutional right to carry, and created quite enough uproar and was finally vetoed by the governor. As we ran our polls on a veto override, we found that most of our colleagues would rather not override at this particular time. We'll probably undoubtedly revisit this in the next legislative session. So with that, Mitch, go for it.
Thanks, Brad. I'm carrying a concealed mic now. Well, I got to tell you, it's quite an honor to be asked to speak to you, especially to be asked to speak in the morning, to be given an hour and a half, to be totally politically incorrect. So fasten your seatbelt. What I intend to do is to show you some videos here, just to kind of give you a sense of reality. As they say, pictures don't lie. And I've been studying this for many, many years now. And I want you to see what I see from time to time. I think as society gets more sophisticated, we're going to see more and more surveillance videos of what's going on in our society. And for me, it's interesting to see just how competent law-abiding citizens who have, in many cases, no training at all, are in defending their lives with a firearm. So I want you to see these, and then I'll kind of tell you how I got into this, give you a little history, go through the law of the state of Utah, which is fairly simple, and then you all have a lot of questions. And my goal is to get to about 45 minutes and then open it up for questions, because I want this to be something that you can get value out of, and not just me up here on my soapbox. Okay. Although I have a tendency to do that. So if anybody has a shepherd's hook, which I'm sure some of the judges that I hear from wish they had when I'm speaking. So I'm going to just go ahead and launch into this, and I hope that Johnny will keep me doing the right thing here if I mess it up technically. Okay, I have to take this off to play these. Some of you have seen these. Some of them have gone viral. Wrong button again. Johnny. There you go. Did he leave? Hey.
Oh.
I just try to. Oh, let's do. Excellent. I was trying to enlarge it. Get them all loaded and everything. And I hit the X instead of enlarge. So that's the way technology goes. Anyway, while he's doing that, let me just tell you a little bit of history. I practiced personal injury law for about 35 years, and actually 25 years when I started doing this. And I started to see what was happening with the issue of the Second Amendment, and that concerned me. And so when we moved out of state, we moved back in, and I decided I wanted to bond with my two sons, one of whom is sitting over here, Jason. And we decided that we were going to use hunting as the thing to do with between father and sons. So I did not, having been out of state for about 3.5 years, did not want to inadvertently violate any of the hunting or firearms laws if we were together. So I started to put together the laws of the state of Utah. And before I knew it, I actually had a compilation of all of Utah's gun laws. It then occurred to me, how do people who are not lawyers understand this stuff and the cross-references? Long story short, we did a book called the Utah Gun Law, and the first one was called Good, Bad, and the Ugly, because we thought some of the laws were ugly, and I commented on those. No one lynched me, so we did the second edition called Utah Gun Law, Pancho's Wisdom, after Pancho Vilos, who was the cowboy action shooting alias that I assumed when I got into the cowboy action shooting sports. We're now on the fourth edition. We actually have these with us, just in case. I'm not here to sell you books. We do sell books. I sell books out of the back of a black Volvo Turbo. So, yeah. Kind of like the revenuers, back in the 20s. Okay, let's go ahead and do this. Sorry. You have it all set up. Okay, now this is a robbery. Okay? Oh. How come that's not? Point the gun at everybody. Yeah. Okay, so the sound quality was poor for some reason, but anyways, there was a internet cafe robbery. 71-year-old guy sitting there working on the internet. These two guys walk in. They've got the old gangster walk. One of them has a baseball bat. Walks in and smashes one of the computers just to terrorize everyone. The other guy's pointing a pistol at everybody, kind of like this, for maximum accuracy. And so the 71-year-old guy gets out of his chair, says, I'm fearing for my life, and he starts shooting when this guy turns away from him.
And these guys, you know, that just walked in with a macho walk, they fell over each other twice. Now, I view this video occasionally just for therapy. Okay, let's go to the next one, the convenience store clerk. I don't know, I hope this sounds a little better on this one, but I guess maybe you can play them over and over or copy them over and over. It distorts some of this stuff. Yeah, okay. She's never held a gun in her hands before. She's handing over the cash, okay? She's doing everything she can ask to do. This is what happened when I clicked it. It was preloaded and it wouldn't have done this if I had hit the wrong button. Anybody ever shot a rabbit? You know what, maybe just better for me to narrate without sound. Okay, let's go to the Walmart one. So anyway, she's never held a gun in her hands before, which I'm also a concealed weapons instructor, and women ask me oftentimes, what gun do I have? Well, it looks like a revolver works pretty good for somebody who's never shot a gun before, or had very little training, because a revolver is a no-brainer. All you do is pull the trigger. There's no safety on a revolver. You just pick it up and shoot. Thank goodness her employer thought enough of her to leave a firearm under the cash register just in case, okay? I mean, to rob her, she was willing to give him everything that she had. She gave him everything she had. She figured she was going to be okay, and then he tells her to step out from behind the counter. How would that make you feel? Okay? So, no option but to reach for whatever you have to defend yourself. And fortunately, she had a fully loaded revolver, and she didn't know if it was loaded or not. She didn't know if it was in the Utah condition, you know, not considered loaded, 2 actions. If she had pulled the trigger and it went click, I don't know what she'd have done. But thank goodness the employer had this thing loaded, and she was able to knock this guy down. Okay, let's go to this one. This is in Walmart, but let's don't even do the sound. Let me stop. Let me get out of your way here. Okay, this guy walks into Walmart. His estranged wife works in the deli, and he's got a butcher knife, okay? And he's walking into her area where she works and pulls his butcher knife out, and he starts stabbing her, okay? And you'll see here in a minute, one of the Walmart employees was a concealed weapon permit holder. Now here he is, he's slashing her. She's trying to stay away from him. Okay, now he finally gets her in a corner. He's got her down. He's on top of her. And a customer climbs over the counter, one-handed, with a pistol, shoots him 3 times, kills him, and saves her life. And then the rest of the video talks about how she feels about it. And finally, let's just go to the last one. So let's just go. First, I want you to look at your materials. While he's getting to that, look at page 7. In contrast to these 3 citizens defending themselves, you all heard about the Empire State shooting about a year ago. The police in New York, Mayor Bloomberg's finest officers, they shot at the bad guy who shot someone in that area. And here's the headline to the article on page 7. Crime. All 9 bystanders wounded in the Empire State shooting were hit by police bullets, not the gunman's. Okay? I hear all the time in my debates, in my presentations, well, law-abiding citizens aren't as well trained as the police. I'm finding out, and I'm not anti-police. I shoot with the police. I get along just great with my local police. They take care of me. I love those guys. I stand with them. They risk their lives every day. I'm one of the few criminal defense attorneys that really likes the cops. I apologize to them before I cut them to pieces in cross-examination. No, it's not always that effective. And so, you know, I say this, but a lot of these police officers practice twice a year, okay? Twice a year. A lot of the people that I train or are concealed weapon permit holders train often. They go to tactical schools, and oftentimes in our competitions, clearly and by far outshoot police officers. So, you know, I mean, that's my observations. I'll tell you a little bit about my history here. Let's just go to Joe Biden, Vice President Joe Biden's advice. If you want to defend yourself, just have a shotgun for women. You don't need an AR-15. I hope the sound's good on this one. Oh, it's not good. Anyway, he tells them, really, you don't need an AR-15, assault rifle. Just get yourself a shotgun, and you'll just be fine, ladies. Okay? Now let's see how that works. That's the AR-15. So anyway, talk about reality shows. Okay. Now why do I do this? How did I get into it? Thank you, Johnny. Thank you for fixing what I messed up. Okay, so pictures don't lie, right? Back in 1998, we wrote our first book. I started writing it. I started dictating it. And one of the first things I saw when can you hear it now? Boy, if it's better for me just to talk, I'll yell and get on my soapbox. Is it on? Okay. So anyway, we did the first book, and like I said, I didn't get lynched, so for being politically correct. And we did the second book, and Mark Shurtleff was elected. And I noticed in studying the laws
that there were a lot of regulations that were promulgated. Regulations are promulgated, laws are passed by the legislature who are voted by the people, but regulations are promulgated by government officials who are not elected. And oftentimes, those regulations go beyond the scope of the statute. Okay? And you have to watch that, because government authorities that go beyond the language of the statute authorizing the promulgation of the regulations, they're not legal. For example, I'm handling a case down here in Washington County. A couple of guys were arrested. There was a county ordinance prohibiting shooting in a turtle preserve. Okay? If you look at Utah's laws, the legislature has never expressly given counties the right to regulate firearms except in one instance, and that's to regulate night hunting and spotlighting. That's the only authority they've been given. And I have defended cases where people are prosecuted under county ordinances that claim to create a statute or an ordinance that makes them guilty of doing certain things. In this case, shooting guns in a turtle preserve, running the risk of killing one of the magnificent desert tortoises that we are not privileged to use for turtle soup here in Utah. And anyway, the county did not have the authority to pass that ordinance, and I convinced the county attorney that that was true, because I've done the same thing in Utah or Salt Lake County with their shooting ordinance, and they all agree now that the counties have no right to do this. Well, it's the same for any other political subdivision. Okay, so I'm getting into this gun law stuff, and I'm starting to see all these regulations that go way beyond the statute. So I go to the Attorney General and I say, whoa, you know, there's a problem here. And it was just before this that Governor Leavitt walked into one of the offices, state offices, and gave one of his employees a hug. I don't know if some of you remember this. And as he hugged this dear employee, he kind of frisked him and found out that he was packing heat, I think is the way the governor put it. And he was shocked. And back prior to 2001, the governor had the HR department pass a regulation saying if you have a whether you have a concealed weapons permit or not, you are not allowed to carry a firearm in your place of employment if you're working for the state of Utah or one of the state's political subdivisions. Okay, so that went into the HR handbook. I think it was online, as I recall. So anyway, I go to General Sherlock, and I tell him this. He says, yeah, I don't think they can do this. So he put his Assistant Attorney General on this issue, and certainly they found out that unless, and this is in your uniformity statute, it is on page 1 at the bottom, it says uniform law, and you'll see that unless the state legislature gives a political subdivision the express written authority to do something, then that political subdivision has no authority whatsoever to pass ordinances or to make rules. And the second statute on that is just on the next page. It's page 2, 53-5A-102, uniform laws for schools and other government institutions. So, and if some of you hunt, how many of you hunt? Just so I can kind of see it. You remember the old ordinances that said if you're chasing a cougar, you know, which dogs or whatever, you can't carry a firearm to protect yourself. Okay. So anyway, yeah. I mean, what if you become the chasee? Okay, the cougar turns on you and eats you, and you don't have a right to defend yourself. I don't know. Anyway, so those are some of the concerns I had. And anyway, General Sherlock just comes around and he says, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to allow state entities and political subdivisions, including the University of Utah, make policies or pass ordinances that violate the state uniformity statute. How many of you remember the University of Utah case? Okay. It was clear in Utah law that anybody with a concealed weapons permit, and this is unique in the country, anybody with a concealed weapons permit can go into any school zone, from kindergarten all the way through the university level. Okay? If you're 21 years of age and you're a student at the university, you may carry a concealed weapon, and the university can do nothing to stop you, except in one area designated as a disciplinary classroom, and they have to have a metal detector to make sure that if you're unarmed, everybody else is unarmed as well, except for law enforcement officers. And the University of Utah refused to do that. They sued the Attorney General, and in that case, University of Utah versus Mark Shurtleff, the Supreme Court held in a 4-1 decision that this uniformity statute means what it says. That you have the right, as a concealed weapon permit holder, to carry a firearm in a school zone, and you also cannot, if you've got a county commissioner, if you've got a school administrator, if you're an HR person, you cannot promulgate regulations that prohibit people from doing what they have a right to do under state law. Okay? Now, do other states do this? They're starting to change a little bit now. It's becoming apparent to them that creating gun-free zones is not the right policy. But Utah is the only state in the union since 2001 that has unequivocally given concealed weapon permit holders the right to carry in a school zone. No questions asked. Doesn't matter if the principal doesn't like it. Doesn't matter if the school superintendent doesn't like it. That employee may carry a firearm with a concealed weapons permit. Okay? Now, the prediction was the blood would be running in the hallways, right? What if a student, what if the teacher gets mad at a student and discipline and blah, blah, blah? It's 2001, that's 12 years ago. Every state employee was given the right to carry a firearm, and they changed that HR policy. Incidentally, the governor said, okay, all right, I'm going to do what's legal. They changed it. 2001, the HR policy, that prohibition of firearms in the workplace was taken out. And since that time, and I know of school administrators, we know of teachers. We have one school that has an administrator, 2 counselors, and 20 teachers that have concealed weapons permits now. And since that time, no student and no teacher has ever been armed in a shooting. And what's more importantly, we have never had a school shooting in Utah. Okay? Now, as I did the research on these cases, and I read everything I can get my hands on relating to shootings, defensive incidents. We also published a book after we did this one called The Self-Defense Laws of All 50 States, where we've analyzed cases all over the country. And I've been doing this for now almost 15 years. If I could give an opinion as someone who's studied this extensively as an expert witness in court, it would be that I have found that the post office's policy of having a gun-free zone in the post office is a negligent policy. And I'll tell you why. How many of you have ever heard the term going postal? Okay. Sometimes employees go postal, and you know you're worried about that. And let's see, I want to make sure I give you a whole 45 minutes to ask me questions. Okay. And get there. No, I'm actually past that. so the post office has been doing this for 30 years. Has it worked? Let me tell you a scenario that I've read over and over again. Okay, what do they call it when you do something over and over again and you're expecting different results? It's insanity, okay? So the post office, the federal government's been doing this over and over again. They prohibit their employees from having any means of self-defense. They fire some person, it's hard to do under federal law, you know, because you got, like, what do they call it? Tenure. Okay. Small business owners, we don't understand what that even means, you know. Tenure, we got tenure. Okay. So, they get fired, they go home, they sit there for 6 months, aren't able to get another job. They say, well, that supervisor ruined my life, and my coworkers were the ones that gave him the information. Okay? And so he picks up a gun, even though the post office has now a no weapons policy. They go back to the post office. Do you think they're worried about the post office's no weapons policy? I mean, here they're going to go back, commit murder, and then commit suicide. They're worried that they're going to violate the Postal Service's no weapons policy? Duh! So they go back and they shoot everybody up because nobody's got a means of self-defense. How many of the recent mass shootings, you can count them on, you know, maybe you have to use your hands and your toes, were in gun-free zones. Sandy Hook, gun-free zone. Okay? Virginia Tech, I have a quote in my book. The legislature of Virginia said, we're going to give Virginia Tech the right, this was before the shooting, to set their own weapons policies. And so Virginia Tech says, we're not going to let anybody, any of the students or teachers, bring a gun into Virginia Tech. Now they have their own police force, okay, which is nice. I don't know where they were. I don't know if there's a Dunkin' Donuts near Virginia Tech or not. But anyway, 32 people dead, okay, without an AR-15 incidentally. And did there no weapons policy? I wish I couldn't take me a while to get to the quote, but it was something like, we're now feeling warm and fuzzy because Virginia Tech is a safe place for us to go to school, and now the students and the parents and the teachers will feel safe and secure. That was written shortly before the Virginia Tech incident, okay? So here's what Pancho says. This is on page, Pancho has angels like Charlie had angels. Page 6, you see the angels there. One is 12 years old. She's got 2 pistols in her hand. Pancho's wisdom is, gun-free zones attract mass shooters like chumming attracts sharks. And the angels say, hey, we're Pancho's angels, and we think gun-free zones are just plain stupid. Okay? And why do I say gun-free zones attract shooters like, or attract mass shooters like chumming attracts sharks? Well, it hasn't been made public, and I'm wondering why, but there was a leak from the investigation at Sandy Hook. And so it's kind of unofficial, but they think that the shooter at Sandy Hook had been studying what the shooter did in Norway. Remember that he went onto the island with a youth conference and then he blew up that building? Well, anyway, 77 people killed. To this kid that was what do you call it when you're playing on a computer? War games, computer games junkie. He wanted to beat that record of 77 killed before he checks out because his life sucks, okay? And, you know, he's godless gothic or whatever. And so he says, let's see, where could I do this? Where would be the easiest place for me to get 77 points, 78 points, or maybe 80 points easily before I check out? So where does he go in elementary school? What's the elementary school? Gun-free zone, okay? And unlike the one security officer at Columbine who ran away when he heard the shooting, these teachers laid their lives down, shielded those children. Tell me if you hadn't put a firearm in one of those teachers' hands, they wouldn't have used that to protect those kids. Okay? So this is common sense. Okay? It's totally politically incorrect. And Utah has been a leader in this politically incorrect policy. And not only have they created a policy where teachers and students at the university level can defend themselves under their Second Amendment right, which the Supreme Court has held is a fundamental right, but they created a climate, a liability climate, that protects property owners who give the concealed weapon permit holders or the citizens the right to protect themselves at work. Okay? And you'll see that policy, you'll see that statute. I think it needs to be beefed up a little bit. And I do have a representative who's willing to broach that issue. It is on page 3, Title 53, 5A 103. You'll see there, landowner immunity for allowing concealed carry on campus, on property. It says, a private property owner, it should say owner and lessee. I don't know that all the schools or all the government entities that own the property. You may be leasing the property. I think that needs to be beefed up. Private property owner, lessee, or their employees who knowingly allows a person who has a concealed carry permit to bring a firearm onto the owner's property is not civilly or criminally liable for any damage or harm resulting from the discharge of the firearm by the permit holder while on the owner's property. So, you're protected if you're a property owner and you allow concealed weapon permit holders on your property to use a firearm to defend themselves. You are not liable for anything that happens. Now, the Granite and the Jordan School Districts, you'll see that in there on pages 4 and 5. They have policies that are part of their employee handbook that tell the employee that if you're carrying a firearm in the school zone, as a teacher or whatever, an employee, that's not part of your job description to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Okay? If you're going to protect people with guns ablaze, that's not part of your job description. Hey dude, you're not a cop. Okay? But if it's necessary to defend yourself, you can do that. And under this statute, they would not be liable. And they make it very clear that employee is doing that under their own volition. And they're taking the risk, not the school at all. Now, whether that's going to work under the workers' comp laws, I don't know. That hasn't been tested in court. But honestly, I think that Utah, because it's now public knowledge, has reduced the chances of a shooting in a school zone. And hopefully, everybody knows that in any state or county facility where you have state employees or any government employees, that it's not a gun-free zone. So if you're going to shoot up the place, you're taking just as much of a chance to go into one of those facilities as you are to go into a police station or a gun store or a shooting range and try to shoot up that place. How come you don't hear about mass shootings in gun stores, gun shows, police stations, and shooting ranges? Why? Somebody's going to fight back. Somebody's got the ability to defend their own lives and defend the lives of others. Now, I've just given you over 45 minutes of politically incorrect information. I am ready to use my legal experience to shoot from the hip, pun intended, and answer your questions. The statutes that apply, I put them in my outline. The one thing I did omit is the statute makes it unequivocally clear that teachers and school personnel have a right to carry a firearm. despite the Gun-Free School Zone Act, which is federal. The federal has an exception. You see that federal act in there. It's called the Gun-Free School Zone Act. But Utah qualifies because Utah gives a permit to carry a firearm, and therefore that's the exception under the federal act as well. So I want all hard questions. Those of you who believe there will be blood in the hallways, I'm ready for you. I'll drop most of my bombs here. Oh, anyway.
Utah does also have an open carry law too. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, if you're open carry, if you do not have a concealed weapons permit, well, whether you have a permit or not, you can open carry, okay? Incidentally, if I wanted to do this, okay, I would be able to do that. It doesn't matter if I'm printing. This is a Glock, it's loaded, it's got 17 rounds or something like that. That's what they call it, a Glock 17. And it would cause people to freak out down, well, not in Utah County, or not in Washington County. But if I went to Utah County, or
No, not Utah.
Salt Lake, or I went to the University of Utah and walked across campus like this, you know, even though I look like a cop on break with a suit on and tie. I have been offered donuts at convenience stores for open carry, okay? I have. I can do that legally, open carry, okay? And if I have a concealed weapons permit, I can keep the gun loaded. Now, a lot of police officers don't know that. They think that if you're open carry, you got to keep the gun unloaded. In Utah, we have a very interesting definition of unloaded. It means you can have 17 in the gun, just as long as there's not one in the barrel, and that's unloaded, okay? So, I just wanted to show you the gun, and it's kind of a dumb thing to do, but I just wanted you to feel comfortable that no one died because somebody had a gun in here. There's more than one person that has a gun in here, incidentally. So, and no one died. You know, the guns just don't jump out of their holster. The other thing is the person that does not have the concealed weapons permit may not carry the firearm into a school zone. So if the law, the constitutional carry law had passed, and those people, even though they had the right to carry a firearm concealed, would not have had the right to go into a school zone. Okay? It would not have given them any other rights other than to just carry the gun concealed where they had the right to carry openly. Now, felons, people who have been convicted of domestic violence, etc., cannot carry a gun, period. So those people are excluded anyway, right? Violent felons. The only people who carry a gun don't have a violent felony or a domestic violence conviction. And so all you're doing is allowing those people to carry concealed rather than openly, so that when you go to the university, well, you can't go to the university. When you go to the what's the new mall up there? I don't go to malls. What's it called? City Creek Mall, and there are a bunch of University of Utah students up there. They do not have an aneurysm. That's the only thing. So they should have named this law instead of constitutional carry. They should have named it protect gun-hating urban liberals from having or an aneurysm. That's all the law gets, to keep from frightening those people. Okay? Yes?
Okay, who makes sure that the felons and everything don't have the guns? I mean, who enforces all this?
The feds. They're broke. Okay? They're going to protect you. Hello? They have an assault weapons ban in Connecticut. Did that law keep this nutcase from having a firearm? No. Anybody that thinks the laws are going to protect them when it comes to firearms, look, it's illegal to smuggle drugs into the United States. There are no drugs in the United States, ladies and gentlemen, because there are laws against it. Okay, if you believe that, I can tell you the Brooklyn Bridge, okay? So, what's the only answer? The only answer is to do what Utah's done. Make sure that there are people there who can defend themselves. And they have an inalienable right. If you read, I put Utah's constitutional provision in there, you have an inalienable right to self-defense.
pre-existed the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. If you repeal the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, it doesn't change anything because that right existed. The people never gave that right to the government to take it away from them. Okay? So that's the way it is. Now, I'm ready. I'm ready for any other questions on this. And don't be intimidated just because of my Glock.
Back to the open carry versus concealed carry. Say I have an employee that works for the county, wants to come in, and they don't have a concealed carry permit. They have a Glock, they have a firearm, they want to put it right on their desk, and it's open, and that's just the way it is. They just want it there.
Well, you're going to have to make a decision, you know. I mean, we have what we call disturbing the peace ordinances. We have disorderly conduct ordinances. The legislature was given that disorderly conduct ordinance this year to make sure that people understood that open carry alone was not a threat. Okay, that same provision, incidentally, is in our brandishing statute. So you can't be charged with a Class A misdemeanor unless there's some showing of intent. But the disorderly conduct statute is a little broader. That's an excellent question. So what do? If this person's been threatening people, if he really is a loony, you're going to have to consult with your attorneys and see if you can do something about it. The point is, though, the fact that there are other people armed in the workplace makes it less likely that this is going to be a place where he chooses to go postal. And if he does, hopefully somebody's prepared. And that's the only thing we can do in the United States. The United States isn't like Japan. We don't have the same culture, okay? People talk about Japan doesn't have, they have a whole bunch of suicides in Japan, incidentally. But, you know, that's where we're at. And, you know, with freedom comes some risk. Let me also tell you one other thing. Everybody talks about the 30,000 people a year, gun homicides. Some homicides are good homicides. Homicide just means killing one human being by another. When cops shoot the bad guy, that's a good homicide. When a law-abiding citizen shoots a bad guy, that's a good homicide, okay? There are 12,000 murders a year. 8,000 of them were committed by guns. You know how many were committed by assault rifles? Under 200. Okay? More people killed by fists, strangulation, and hammers, or other blunt objects than assault rifles. Okay, if you're gonna talk about statistics, let me ask you this. Some of you may work for the state tax commission. If I file a tax return, and as we said, 8,000 murders with guns, if I have $8,000 worth of expenses, and I have $2.5 million of income, and I only report the expenses and show an $8,000 loss, would that be ethical or legal? No, it would be tax fraud, right? Okay, if you're not considering the 2.5, they say it's anywhere from 100 to 2.5 million defensive uses of guns a year versus the 8,000 murders, then you're not comparing the benefits of gun ownership to the detriments of gun ownership. You're only looking at the detriments. So in a tax return, it'd be like just looking at the expenses, not looking at the income. Okay? There are huge benefits of gun ownership in America. And on top of that, the Second Amendment doesn't say, based upon statistics, you can keep and bear arms. Doesn't matter. You know, look at our legal system. It's under the burden of proof in the criminal justice system, it's better to let 9 guilty people go free than to convict one innocent man. So you're going to let 9 child molester serial killers go free rather than convict one person accused of that crime, right? So there are risks for freedom, and we do it all the time in the criminal justice system. I don't think there are any risks of keeping an armed America because the benefits far outweigh the detriments. And that's just the facts, ladies and gentlemen. I've been studying it for 15 years. Okay? I'm ready for any other questions. Is my time up, or where are we? We're good to go. You have excellent questions, and I want to answer your questions regarding your employee-employment relationship, because this is a little different. Okay? There's no real precedent, because we're number one. We're first. Okay? We're gonna have to work it out. Yes.
I just read through adopt some sort of weapons policy that's kind of similar to the one that you put in here.
I was thinking of a Confucius, you know, the
Yeah.
bird in one hand, and that. It's up to you, it really is. I think it's,
What do we say for having?
I mean, I just leave it out. Or, you know, you can do that, but you're protected, especially if you're on the property. You let these people come in, and I don't think, you know, honestly, I don't think you can prohibit them, if they're open carry, and they don't have a concealment permit, unless they're making threats. They still have a right to defend
But
themselves.
what's deemed a threat? How's that? Because that's like, that's broad. What deems a threat?
Yeah, it's
how do you
a
define that?
totality of circumstances. So you gotta watch that, you know. But hopefully you got other armed people when your security guards go for donuts, hopefully you have other armed personnel in the workplace. Yes.
You know, this is where it gets to be the gray area that's tough to work with, especially.
That's why I work at Route Race City.
Yeah.
That's what they talk about.
When you try to weigh, especially in a conservative state such as Utah, when you try to weigh the private property rights as compared to the gun rights of the Second Amendment.
Now, the private property is different. We're talking, you're all government employees, right? Okay, so the policy for private
That's-
employment,
yeah.
private business, they can prohibit firearms in the workplace.
That's correct. Such as the incident that happened recently in Riverdale at Penny's, where the gentleman used to show that he could carry his AR-15, strapped it to his back, and went to Penny's.
I'm surprised he wasn't swarmed by shoppers wanting to buy it from him now.
Yeah, you're probably right. On eBay, he could probably really do well. But
It's doubled.
What
It's
it
doubled
is-
since Sandy Hook and the threat of gun control. You can now have to pay, you know, over $1,000 for any AR-15. And I was gonna do this demonstration. I was gonna bring my AR-15, and we were gonna set up a bunch of old law books and show it to them and see that this woman's portrayal was correct. But no, go ahead.
Anyway.
Bottom line of the question is.
The bottom line of the question is, when you get into a situation, in that particular case, there were many customers exiting the store quickly.
Yeah, those are people who went to the University of Utah.
Well, whether it be, but that store obviously suffered, or maybe the gun guys, everybody loves guns, and I do, by the way, decided to shop at Penny's that day because how nice that was. But for the most part, they lost a lot of customers who thought that there was something going on because their mind had jumped to it because of recent themes here in the United States.
And incidentally, the disorderly conduct statute was going to make a difference between.
You're right, I was very familiar with that statute, died in the Senate. But anyway,
So it would have made it better. Because
Yeah,
it
I
would have
know
made it
that.
clear that guys like that do not have the right to do that versus people just walking around with an open carry, you know, looking like a detective on break.
I guess my point is that those are the people who like to draw attention to that particular thing, their right to carry, that probably cause the most problems in trying to secure our gun rights because it brings everybody out of the woodwork. And the disorderly conduct was actually, Mr. Ray, Representative Ray, and his bill was to address that particular issue. Had he not done that, that would not have been an issue. So sometimes we're in our zealousness, we become our worst enemies in what we're doing.
So that's true. That is true. I got to tell you, I served a mission in Switzerland, and every citizen, I believe, even the women, are required to do military service. So every home has a machine gun or something similar, okay, with ammo. There's some strict federal controls over that, but you will see people going to their duty, also in Israel, and they'll be carrying an AR-15 or an M16, just like that guy was carrying it. And you see that all the time on the trams, all the time you see machine guns, people carrying them. And no one seems to freak out. And so part of the problem is the person doing that for show, but the other part of the problem is we've become so freaked out by the sight of a gun that it's become what some people call homophobia, where you're afraid of weapons. A Greek word, it's Greek. gave you a lot of words, it's God's grease. You know, I mean, honestly, the gun, I don't even think he had a magazine in the gun. Okay? If people knew enough about the firearms, if this had been a society where everybody had been in the military, they'd see there was not a magazine in the firearm, and they'd see that this was absolutely harmless. They had it strapped across them, okay? So it was really not a scary thing. I'd have probably gone up to him and said, oh my gosh, let's have a trigger job. You know? 'Cause mine does, and it's beautiful. Okay? And just, I wish every principal had an AR-15 and a little gun safe in their office, because I took one, we've trained over 75, well, I haven't trained. 75% of our Utah legislature has a concealed weapons permit, according to Representative Odom. We've trained probably over 50% for free, okay? And so I took a Democrat out, a woman Democrat, I won't tell you the name.
Pardon?
Huh? Okay, and it wasn't anybody in the room. So we went out after the class and we were shooting pistols, okay, at targets. And this person did not shot, you know, and I told her at the first of class, I'm going to show you why everyone should have an assault rifle. And she rolled her eyes and shook her head. And so I put this pistol, little 22 in her hand, and she missed. I put the Glock in her hand. She's a little more familiar with that. She held it like this. And she missed, obviously. And then I put the AR-15 in her hands, the one that was used at the school shooting at Sandy Hook. And she was threading needles with this thing. And so if you ever see someone walking around in JCPenney's with an AR-15, buy it.
I do want to make one thing clear. When you said that 75% of the legislators have a concealed weapons permit, some you did for free. For full disclosure, I paid for mine. I think that's important. Full disclosure, I paid for mine.
I would appreciate it in the future if they all paid. Since now I'm robbing convenience stores to keep the mortgage going.
Mitch, did you talk about that there can be restrictions at the courthouse?
Oh, the courthouse. Oh, do we have time?
Churches, schools,
Not sure. One more thing along with that, mental health facilities. Address that just a little bit, like our.
Yeah, they fit in with the courthouses. Okay, here's the deal. We have a statute that says that a government facility can set up a secured area. And I sent the outline, I replaced the parking lot bill that I have in your outline with that statute, and it didn't get, and it's my fault, I didn't get it in there in time to make the printing. But there's a secured, you can search it, secured area, okay? And you look at the definition of secured area. If you have a secured area, you may do this. If you're a government entity, okay, you're all government people, so you can set up a secured area. But if you're going to do that, well, you can't do it in the workplace. You can do it. That's a good question. Just how extensive is a secured area? The courthouse has done it, but they don't provide for a lockbox. If you're going to set up a secured area, you have to provide a lockbox per the Utah statute. The courthouses, almost none of the courthouses, except for maybe Brigham City still, provides a lockbox for the concealed weapon permit holders to put their firearm in the lockbox. So what that does, I think, is it invalidates the federal, or the felony-free. If you go into a secured area with a firearm, whether you have a concealed weapons permit or not, and it's a properly set up secured area, it will be a state felony, class 3 felony if you go through there. But you have to provide lockboxes. I don't know why these courts are preventing this, because, for example, when I go into the U.S. Attorney's Office, they have lockboxes. You just go through security, you let the security guard know. Nobody touches the gun except the person that's handling the gun. He puts the gun in a lockbox, takes a key, just like at the airport. You don't take it into a secure area at the airport. But they have lockers. At least they used to have lockers in the airport, and you could lock your luggage, okay? You just put your gun in there, take out the key, and now you're fine. And I don't know why courthouses aren't doing that. The mental health facilities, they're going to create they're going to create a secured area, then, and I think it just names the facilities that give a secured area. I meant to put it in the outline. Then they have to provide lockboxes. Otherwise, the felony 3 doesn't apply. Okay? So you're cutting your ability to enforce the secured area if you're not providing a lockbox under the state statute. Does that answer the questions? There's this conflict between the legislature and the courts. See, the court says, well, we are, we have right as a branch of government, separation of powers, to create our own policies. But if you look at the Utah Constitution, the only authority given under the Utah Constitution to regulate firearms rests with the legislature. And so the courts really don't have that power.
More of an observation rather than a question. These days, I mean, somebody can have a gun, but you can't find ammunition. So I don't know what good the gun
Well,
does.
some of us that set up what we call ammo storage, for our food storage.
Yeah.
You can buy from us, for like 4 times the price.
I'll come get your card.
You want to talk to me about that? It's not for sale. I'm ready. I wish I could take another. I wish we could do this as a 3-hour college class. Maybe you have to hear from me. Look at that. I've got 7 minutes, okay, for questions. Who was that? Were you next? Go ahead.
I'm just kind of questioning your, so if you have a company or policy that says you cannot carry weapons in your workplace, probably needs to come out.
It probably needs to come out because it's illegal.
And they can carry, whether they have a pistol, permit or not, right?
They have a right to carry without concealed weapons, but they're not in a school zone. In a school zone, they have to have a concealed weapons permit.
If they were out there, like on the road and stuff, they're out there,
Yeah, like DOT employees. Was it the DOT employees that got shot at down in the Four Corners by that guy down there that they were shooting his insignia on his truck or something? They found him later on. Remember the 2 guys that shot one of the police officers? I mean, you got wildlife officers, you've got people working in the hinterland, and after you come upon a cache of marijuana or something like that, and you have no ability to defend yourself if you're a county employee or state employee, I think that's bad. Bad. Yeah. So, but take it out. And one of the things I'm going to do, I get calls, I spend not half my time, I spend a great deal of my time chasing down political subdivisions who have created no gun policies. You can't carry a gun on nature paths. St. George had one, and we got it repealed. But Florida just passed a law that said if you violate this as a political subdivision, there will be a $5,000 a day penalty for violating Florida's uniformity statute. Guess who were falling over each other to make sure that they complied, including in their HR handbooks? Yes, Florida political subdivisions, because they didn't want to incur $5,000 a day penalty provided under the new Florida statute. And I am pushing for that because I'm tired of chasing this down for free. Yes?
Question back to the
Courts,
courts.
okay?
Like the justice court, let's just say it, justice court. If we don't provide lock boxes, does that mean people can send?
Well, you could probably still hold in contempt of court, maybe. I don't know. That's never been tried. And I'm not going to I'm not going to defend them either, unless they pay me. So I'm sick of it working for nothing. You can't get them under the felony 3 unless you have a lockbox, I don't think. And I think that's why the state courts, the district courts, have provided they promulgated a rule saying that you're in contempt of court if you carry a firearm in a secured area.
But you can't prevent them from taking the weapon if it's going to be a...
And you have metal detectors because a lot of justice courts don't. Which county? Washington County? Man, you guys are second to the Utah County for number of John Birchers.
If I get into this, I expect some turtle soup.
Mitch, as an attorney that might defend someone against a county, I want to get your take on how important do you think it is that somebody walks into the courthouse and they're open carrying or they're concealed carrying and printing, county employee recognizes that and decides that they want to make sure that that person is still carrying legal. At what point, what kinds of questions might that county employee ask that person, or instruction might that county employee give that person?
Do you have a
take
state
to court?
officer? Do you have an officer present? Because a police officer can protect himself by doing a pat down, as I recall, under the Fourth Amendment, and ask questions.
So as an example, they walk into walk up to the counter at the auditor's office, and it's obvious that they have a gun under their jacket, and so the person at the counter says, "Are you a legal concealed carry? Are you carrying a concealed weapon?"
I don't think they have to
as a
disclose
problem?
that. I don't think they have to disclose that to anybody an officer. I mean, so if you have a state post certified police officer, I think you can ask that question. But I don't know that anybody else can.
So if you see a lot of people being asked that question when they shouldn't be, are you bringing a lawsuit against that?
Well, that's the question of damages. You know, can I recover my attorney's fees by getting huge damages from something that simple? And the probabilities are probably not.
Okay, I was just kind of fishing around for what.
It's an economic situation. I've got some close calls on cases. I won't tell you what, but I've got some close calls on cases where I think that there's a substantial chance of a loss of a lawsuit. I won't take the case because it's an economic decision on my part. Now maybe somebody that's got a lot of time and a railroad retirement, now he's an attorney, maybe he'll take the case for whatever. But I don't. Yeah, I hope I answered your question. Did I answer your question?
How about as an employee requiring them to report to like the sheriff just as a policy to know what employees are carrying?
I don't think that's unreasonable. There's nothing that I know of that would make that illegal. In fact, I would encourage, like for example, in a school where there's 20 people that have concealed weapon permits, I think they all ought to know who they are.
That would be the reason behind it.
Yeah, and work with the what do you call a resource officer, so he knows who they are. And you may want to work with local law enforcement as well, so they can identify these people. And now I think that would be true in any workplace setting. Now there are some workplace employees. Now you cannot, under the law of the state of Utah, you cannot just indiscriminately disclose who has a concealed weapons permit. You can't even get that from PCI. Okay, it's illegal for them to disclose it. But if they voluntarily disclose it, which I think they should, so they don't get shot as one of the perpetrators, maybe wear a sign saying, "I'm not going postal."
What if you have an upset employee or member of the public, a spouse, who wants to meet with you, and as they're coming in, you can see they have a weapon, and you ask them to remove that, put it in your car. See a problem with that? If you have an upset employer, upset employee's spouse.
Well, if they've said anything threatening, I don't see why you couldn't have a police officer there, and that police officer check and make sure that that's a legal weapon. Because I think that's foresight, and I don't think that's inappropriate here at all.
What if you don't have a police officer there? You're just there. If you don't have a police officer there,
I'm not sure you can. What do you think? I can't think of any reason why. Now, if it's a school, obviously, they'd have to. You could ask them if they have a concealed weapons permit, because they're not supposed to be there. They don't have a concealed weapons permit. But if it's another government office, I'm not sure that anybody can ask.
well, if you see it, that's what I'm saying. If you see it, you walk in your coat, brushes open, you see it, and they've been upset at you for something. I think the question is, can you tell them? I'm not going to have to be.
Let me tell you this. That's an excellent question. That is an excellent question. And we have a law that kind of covers that. It's called, you may not possess a firearm commit an illegal act, okay? And that may be a probable cause to an officer. I would call the police immediately if you have that situation. And if you have security guards, notify them. Because that way, that person can be questioned about their intentions under those circumstances, okay? The only other thing you can do is, if you saw a tombstone, you saw the double barrel shotgun on the swivel over the table. Yeah.
Well, I think you probably said not to meet with people, but you got it. And
Yeah,
I mean, the question is whether you're liable for that.
Pardon?
The question is whether you're, as a county, because you're a county.
I don't think you're liable. I don't think you're liable. I don't think you have to put yourself at risk. If you think there's a risk, I mean, it's the flip side of the coin that we're talking about here, right? You don't want to disarm employees who have a fundamental right to defend themselves. How do you then justify an employee who may or may not be armed, who's confronting someone with a firearm that you know they have, who's upset with you? Isn't it reasonable to take precautions and say, I know you're upset, I'm not going to discuss this with you unless you take your firearm and put it in the car. You know, you're taking reasonable precautions. It's the flip side of what we're talking about. I don't think that's unreasonable. Okay? And I've never seen a lawsuit against a public employee stemming from that kind of reaction. So, is it possible? I mean, anybody can bring a lawsuit for any reason, but whether they win or not is another thing. I've never seen anything like that as extensively as I've searched it. So I've searched in the civil arena as well as the criminal arena. So I think that's an excellent question. I think that's the way I would handle it. I would be armed, too. So
I would just say, didn't you say at the beginning of this discussion that people could be a threat without a gun? So if a person is threatening you, you can have, there's a lot of things you can do to prevent that situation. And regardless of whether they have a gun or anything, if you're in that situation, it's better to postpone talking to the person or have somebody in authority there with you than to just go on. I mean, that's the choice we all have as common sense.
yeah, and plus you can all have a violence prevention policy. They have a right to be armed, but they don't have a right to be violent. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.